All right, friends, we are in week 4. This is our last office hour of the week. And we're going to go over Faker API. So this is one of our core assignments, and we are going to just build this from scratch. I currently have nothing. I just have a folder that says Faker API. I have nothing in there. So we are just fully going to build this from scratch. So what we're doing here is we're using 2 JavaScript libraries, and we're going to create a simple API that generates a user and a company object. Cool. So I know that I'm going to have a user and a company object. Pretty simple. Libraries we're going to be using are Express for our server and Faker. Faker's just going to give us some random data. So we're going to have to set it up in a specific way, and we'll have to look at that and how we want to set that up. But we're going to use Express as our server. So that way, when I use Postman or if I want to query or I want to do some things, I can actually use Express to do that. And Express, again, remember, is the framework for our, it's interesting, it says libraries. It is a framework that goes on top of our Node.js that really is kind of the drill sergeant, tells us what to do, where to go, and what we're doing. Okay, so the whole point is we're broadening our understanding of APIs. For this assignment, you're tasked with creating a user and company object. Okay, we can do that. We know at least we have our key value pairs, right? We're going to have some user object and company object. I'm going to have a key of password, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to have a company object that has an ID and name. Address. Address is going to be an object itself. So it's going to be an object within an object. And we're going to have all these keys with this as well. So it looks like Faker has tons of methods that we can use to populate specific fields, randomly generated information. So it looks like I need to add this project to my install. So before I even get started, before I just start downloading and installing things, I'm going to set up my code. Ooh, that's weird. I'm going to set up my code so that we're good to go. We're just thinking about backend. So I am not doing anything with React, meaning I don't need to run npx create React, React app. I don't need to deal with a client. I don't need to do any of that. What I do need is a backend. And again, we've got our front end, we're going to call it client, and back end, we're going to call it server. So what I'm going to do is within this, I'm just going to create a server backend. Perfect. Now, knowing that within my server, I will always have a server.js. Today in class, we're going to go over sort of server.js and how we're going to take a bunch of stuff out of it, but we haven't learned that yet. So we're just going to use our knowledge we have now. And technically, we're not supposed to be learning that until next week, but that's okay. We're skipping ahead because it's going to make more sense in the future. But right now, we're just going to have everything live within the server.js. Cool. So I have a few things I'm going to do. I'm going to need to install Faker. And here is an example of how we can use Faker. Okay, so that's good. I'm also going to want to read this API information because anytime we're dealing with APIs, I just want to see what exactly do I need to do? How exactly do I need to bundle things or make things look in order to get the information that I want, right? So first and foremost, we're going to create a new project folder with your terminal and navigate to your new folder. We've already done that. We are crushing it. So here we're going to create a package JSON. Now I have sometimes if people just run npm, install Express, it'll automatically do that for you. That has not been happening for me. I don't know why. So we're going to have to do exactly what that said. So let me make this bigger. So I'm in my Faker API, and what I need to do when I'm going to install some things is I'm going to install, or I'm going to run npm init-y. Cool. So I'm going to come to here, and since I'm in my Faker API, one thing I need to do is I need to navigate to the folder I want these dependencies to be in. So I'm going to navigate to server. Perfect. Now I can run npm init-y. Cool. So I have created this. If I check this, I now have a package JSON. That's perfect. Okay. Perfect. So right now, because it's just a package JSON, I haven't added anything. I don't have any node modules and I don't have a package lock. But I know that once I actually install Express and Faker, a node modules page is going to be created and a package lock JSON is going to be created with this. So let's go ahead and do that. Say npm install. Now I could say npm install Express, enter it, then say npm install faker at faker-js/faker. Or if you wanted to do multiple packages, you could just say something like this, express space, and then you do the next one. Ooh, cuckoo, didn't like that. That didn't work. But you would just do the name. So I'm going to say at faker, what was it? Faker-a-js/faker. At faker-js/faker. And because I have a space here, it's going to install this package, and then it's going to install this package. So I run that. It's installing these. That's great. Perfect. I've got 0 vulnerabilities. We're good to go. Now, if I look at my code, now if I look at my code, that gray's tripping me out. I see this node modules and this package lock. Because I see node modules, I always want to do a dot get ignore. This is just me really setting this up at the beginning. And then I'm going to say node modules. Node modules. Perfect. I want to ignore these. I don't want to have to deal with them. I don't want them to be updated whenever I push this to GitHub. I won't be pushing this to GitHub simply because it's a core assignment and then you guys can copy it. Plus the code's already on the platform. So I won't be pushing it. But if I was going to, this prevents, again, this entire folder from running or being uploaded. So that's good. Perfect. And get rid of that and get rid of that. Do just want to check. Sometimes I like to do this. You don't always have to. But I always like to check and say, okay, perfect. Well, this is added. I'm good to go. And here's the versions that I've downloaded. Perfect. Okay. So we were rocking and rolling. We created this. We've installed this. We've created a server.js file. So now what I need to do is I need to import Express and Faker. So yeah, we're going to do this, and this is just our setup, and then we're going to get into sort of what is pseudocode, how do we do this, how do we create this? So first off, I'm just going to import stuff. Now, remember, if you guys remember yesterday, ES6, there is a weird thing you have to do if you say import, like import Faker from Faker. Not sure why. I still haven't figured out what exactly is going on, but what we can do is we can say const Faker. And this can be anything, right? Faker can be unicorn, but makes sense. Let's call it Faker if our product is called Faker, right? And so we're going to do that. We now need to do express as well. So I'm saying const express equals require express. This is, again, us importing this is express package, this framework that we just downloaded. And there's a couple things we also need to do with this. And I'm trying to talk before GitHub Copilot does it for me. I first need to not only bring in Express, but I need to run Express, right? I need to run the application so that way I actually have the framework up and running. And that's where we're going to say const app equals Express. Perfect. This is us calling this Express function. We're saying, cool, we want to run this. We want to bring this in. Let's actually create this application. Another thing that's not necessary, but is nice to do is to claim my port and put that in a variable. Because if I'm going to call port in more than one spot, it just makes sense to sort of have it in a variable, because that way, if it ever changes, I don't have to go change it in multiple spots. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb. If you're going to call it in more than one spot, kind of just put it in a variable, and then it kind of takes down how much code you're doing. Great. Now, the last thing I need before we even do any sort of code, create anything, is I'm going to do app.listen. Right? And what I'm going to give it is my port. This is for my application to be listening to saying, what do you want me to do? How do I do this? Or sorry, it's going to be listening for my routes, and it's going to have port, which is our 8000. And then all it's going to do is console log listening on port 8000. Perfect. Cool. This is up and running. This is fully set up. I should be able to say something like nodemon server.js. I don't think it should give me an issue. Oh, it did, because I don't have, let's see, what did it say? Couldn't find Faker. Okay.
Oh, I know this one.
Tell me. I think I see it too.
Oh, I mean, maybe it's the same thing. Chris is
Yeah,
probably. Is it do with the curly
thing, I think.
bracket? It is?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. It's do the curly bracket. Chris told me that one.
If you put curly brackets around Faker on line 1, I think it should work.
Yeah, but I don't know if you installed the other faker. I'm not sure which faker you're using, but I know one of them you have to do the curly bracket.
Let's try it.
Uh,
Nope,
Hmm,
it's not an issue. Module
interesting.
not found.
Which faker are you using?
I also use the at faker -js. I don't know if that matters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah, you have
exactly
to
what
use
I
that.
used, which is just straight from the platform.
Yeah, I think you have to put the at
So
dash
my
JS
line
faker.
one actually has that.
Yeah.
At Faker JS.
Yeah,
Okay. Done with my code. Okay. There we
I
go.
had that issue and I had it out in Discord and Alan helped me out like a day or two ago.
So within curly brackets, but you said at.
So that faker is good. It was the
That faker's
require faker that I had to change.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay. So
Yeah.
then this goes at Faker dash JS. This guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, let's test it. Perfect.
Woo.
There we go.
Teamwork.
There we go. Well, what the error was saying is that it was looking for this Faker module, and it's saying I have no idea what that is. And so I'm glad that you guys found that answer. That's way easier for us. But it was looking at this line and saying, hey, I have no idea what this is. You're just saying Faker, but we called it, or we have it, or we installed Faker-js/Faker. So that's a quick fix. Thanks so much for that, Chris. Perfect. But now we see that my port is up and running, or my console's up and running. We're good to go. It's listening. Awesome. That is all I needed. We're good to go. So we can go to this and we can cross this one off. We are already almost halfway done. We technically ran our file with NodeMon. I'm not going to cross that off yet, but we are good to go. We have created this. We have done this, which is awesome. Okay. So now what we have is we really start using our code, right? We're really going to kind of get in the code. It's no longer the setup. And what I need to do is I need to create two functions. So create user, create company that return an object with the properties listed above. So it's these guys right here, right? And so what I know is I need to create some sort of object, and it's going to return, right? We're going to use our, similar to this, we have this create product, and I'm going to use this kind of as my, well, not this guy, because this is actually in here. Oh, interesting that it has this here. Oh, there you go. There's the answer. Okay. Sorry. So I'm going to, sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked. I'm going to create two functions. Notice that these are functions, right? It's not just an object. I need to create two functions, one called create user, one called create company. Now, and I'm going to use these guys up here. So let's go look at the API and see how does it work. Okay. So I see that I can say faker dot address dot, and then I can say something like city. And what that's going to give me is some random city. So if I'm looking at this, I see that, all right, for an address, I can do a bunch of stuff. I just say faker dot address dot, and then whatever I need it to do. If I needed city, if I needed, let's see, their city name. It's kind of different. I'm not sure exactly what's different between that and city. Returns a randomized local and existing city name, generates a random localized city name. So this is, do you want an actual city name? Or do you just want some random word that could be your city? That's just making something up. East Jarrett Mouth. That's pretty funny. So I could use either one, right? Their city prefix. Cool. We've got this. We have country. We know that that's part of it. So, okay, cool. So I think I'm starting to see a pattern here. That whenever I'm creating something, all I have to do is say faker dot, and then I'm going to have to find my type. So if it's an address, if it's a name, if it's a first name or last name, right? I could say faker dot name. Okay, perfect. So I know that I need to use that structure to create my objects, right? To create my create user and my create company. So before I jump in, I'm going to pseudocode a little bit. All pseudocode is it is a way that we write out what we're going to do before we actually do it. So if I say, I am going to this is a great example. So create a route that will return a random user. Really, it's just basically saying create a function. Never spell function right. That's why I like Python more. That creates a new user. Perfect, because that's what it said that I'm going to do. I know that I'm going to need to do that. I'm going to need to create a function that creates a new, and then what did it say we're going to do? Company, right? So I'm going to say creates a new company. And if I look a little bit, forward, I'm going to see not only do I need to do that, so I need to create those are on my list. I'm also going to create a route that returns a new user, create a route that returns a new company, and to create a route that returns both, right? So I'm actually going to write that down instead of having to go back and forth. I'm going to just say that returns a new user, create a route that returns a new company, and create, I don't know if it's listening or what, or how GitHub Copilot knows that. But okay, I've written down the things that I need to do in order for this to be done, right? And the idea behind pseudocode is it's a great way. And right now, there's only a few things and it's kind of already written out for us. But as we're really building this, it's a great way for you to put a pin in something, right? If you're like, I need to create this function. I know I need to create it. I'm not going to do that yet because I need to do something else. But us writing and saying, okay, I know I need to create a function here. It's going to take in this. Okay, perfect. I'm just going to write that down in like just normal terms. And then you can always go back and do it. And it actually creates this sort of blueprint. So now if I'm just looking at this, I really, especially when I was first learning how to code, I liked to go in here and actually then write my functionality for whatever I just did. So if I'm wanting to create a new user, I'm going to say something like const. I'm going to call this like new user. I'm just going to say new user. I'm going to say object, new user, because what I don't want it to do is confuse this with this. So I'm going to say obj. Cool. So I have this new user object. And if we go back here, I see that I have a few things. I need a password, an email, phone number, last name, first name, ID. I actually don't like, I'm going to flip this because it feels weird to have password at the front. One thing you could do is you could say in here, like the user needs to have a password, email, F name, L name. Oh my goodness. L name. What else was it? First name, last name, email, phone number, and ID. Perfect. So I'm going to say phone number, phone num, and ID. Perfect. You could do that. You could write that out. You didn't have to, again. But it's a great way to like, as I'm building this, instead of me having to go like, wait, what is this again? Oh yeah, nope. I can just actually have it here. So I'm going to create this new user object. And what this is going to be is a callback. Perfect. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to implicitly return. So meaning that I want, whenever this is created, I just want it to be returned. I don't want to have to say return because I have this parentheses. It'll automatically be returned. I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to say ID, right? I'm going to create my key here because that's the key that I am trying to do, ID, right? Now, I'm not going to always listen. And actually today, or when I was building out today's lesson, GitHub Copilot really kind of messed me up and messed up my code. I trusted it and I was paying for it and trying to fix everything. So I don't always want to trust it. I want to go to my actual API documentation. This is a great way to do this. And I don't necessarily have a ID here unless I have this unique, right? An ID is a unique identifier. And so let's see if anything is here. No, not really, right? I didn't know if unique meant unique identifier. Let's see, what other things do you guys see that we could use for an ID?
Probably random.
Yeah, let's check random. So here's random alpha. So random numbers, random string, or alphanumeric, numeric, a word. If we wanted it to be a word, I'm just wondering if it has anything else we could use. And the reason I want that is when we deal with MongoDB, it's going to be, oh, it looks like database. Yeah, there we go. That's exactly what I was wanting. Thanks, Christopher. Is I'm wanting something that is a random key or ID, not key, sorry, a random ID that is going to look like this, because this is what MongoDB is actually going to use. So for the sake of this, I'm actually just going to use this exact thing. I'm going to take this and say faker.database, because that's going to emulate really what we're doing. ID is going to be faker.database.mongodb object ID. So what this is going to do is whenever we're creating this new object, it's going to create a random string that in this case is just going to look exactly like a MongoDB ID, because this is exactly what it looks like. So I'm going to do that. Perfect. That's awesome. Cool. What's the next thing I'm going to do? I said I was going to be inverted, but I usually like to do this, and then I like to say first name is going to be, and then if we look here, again, let's go to name. We've got a first name and a last name and the sex. So I'm just going to say first name, pretty easy. Faker.name. First name. Perfect. Last name is going to be the exact same thing. So I can trust GitHub Copilot there. Then I like to do email, and then I like to do, or I'm going to do phone number actually. It doesn't matter which one we do. It literally doesn't matter. And this is just for my sake. These do not have to match, right? This and this. This is just pseudocode. This doesn't matter. The computer's never going to read it. When it sees this comment out, it's never going to read it. Cool. So I'm going to say phone number is going to equal, let's see if it has a phone number. Phone. Perfect. We've got a phone. And I've got a phone dot number. Or I could do phone number. Oh, this is phone like this. Oh, that's format. I'm not quite sure what exactly the difference between this and phone number are. Generates a random phone number versus.
I think I tried the phone number one and it was deprecated and it wouldn't do it. So I ended up doing faker.phone.number.
Yeah, so deprecated means that it is old and no longer in use, right? That's what deprecated means. So yeah, exactly. I didn't even see that. Thanks for that, Christopher. So when we're reading this documentation and it's saying this method will be deprecated and removed in a future version, what we don't want to do is build our application on that, right? When we have some sort of dependency, we don't want to build that. We want something that is going to be sort of there for a while. And that's kind of an issue with development is sometimes we do build on something and it gets deprecated. So some library somewhere stopped doing something one way and now it kind of affects your code. So that's part of the idea about reading documentation. We want to make sure, obviously, like things aren't deprecated. This is good documentation too. So let's just use that. So we're going to say faker.phone.number. And again, every time this is running, this is just generated a function to get me that. I'm going to get my email and then I'm going to do a password. Let's go check, make sure, because it was just trying to give me a deprecated one. So let's say, is there an email one? Nope.
It was under.
It was under which one? I'm sorry.
You're on the right one.
Okay, I assumed it was maybe internet. Emoji.
If you look on the right side of your,
oh yeah,
that's everything that's under that one, like under internet.
Perfect. Thank you. I didn't even say that. Okay. Yep. Just internet, an email, and then we got password. Generates a random password. Cool. What we can see here too is if we just do this, by default, the number is going to be 15. So it's 15 characters. This is our default parameters, right? If I want to pass in some information, I can. If I wanted it longer, I could say password 20. But like here, I could put a number of 30, right? And it's not going to change that, but by default 15 is fine. And that's not really the point of today, is to do that. But now we see we've got ID, perfect. We've got phone number, first name, last name, email, and password. So we are good to go. I can remove that. We have now created my new user object. Now I need to change function. Never, ever will ever spell that right. And now let's do the same thing. So I'm going to create a new company object. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the same thing. I'm going to come to our actual assignment. I need an ID, a name, an address. And within that address is going to be an object of, or address, that value is an object with street, city, state, zip code, country. So let's go in and do that. We've already dealt with ID. So I can actually just copy this entire thing and paste it. Perfect. And then here, let's see if they've got a company. Let's see, company, yep, and name. So I can just say faker.company.name. Perfect. So I say name is faker.company. I think it was just name, right? Yeah, just name. So let's get rid of this. I even think, let's see. Generates a random company name. I'm wondering if that, oh, see here, this is why I love it. VS Code. This isn't Copilot, but it says that this is deprecated to actually just use company name. That's what this line is saying. So name, perfect. Now I need address. It's going to be equal to another object of street. So we know that that is going to be street. So let's come here and say address is going to be here. We've got, we could do street name or we could do street. I think either one. Street name deprecated. Nope. Localized street name versus, trying to understand what the difference between street name and street is. Doesn't look like there's a difference. One is a string, the other is a string. They literally have the same example, so looks like we can do. Oh, so if I was looking at this, I would see available since version 2.0.1 and then version 7. So if I was a betting person, I'm not. If I was a betting person, this is going to take over. And if I've sort of seen the kind of how it was like company name went to name, the street name, if I'm betting in the next year, this is going to be deprecated, right, in the next couple of versions. And so I'm actually just going to do street. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? On why I would do that or why I'm thinking that? Cool. We also need to look and say, what else do we need to have? We need a city, state, zip, and country. So let's go back here and I'm going to say city is going to be equal to, let's see if address city, and I'm just going to check these all right now and then city's good to go. Let's see if city names any different. City names a different version, right? A little bit newer version. So I might do city name. City name. City would have worked, but I'm going to do city name. They're not going to hurt anything. I'm going to say state is faker address state. Go here. Perfect. So this is, we could do the abbreviation if we just wanted NV or ND, or we could just say the actual word. Word's fine. City, state, zip code. Let's check that. Zip code's good to go. Yep. Address, zip code. And then what was the last one we needed? Country. So let's check country. And just .country. Cool. Perfect. So now we've got both of pieces. I need to close this out. Perfect. So now I've created both of my functions that whenever I call them, I can create a new user or I can create a new company. Perfect. Good to go. Makes sense. Address is closed. Perfect. Now I need to go to my next piece. I'm going to create a route that returns a new user. Now here, it kind of, again, as always, GitHub Copilot kind of steals the thunder, but I'm going to do an app.get route because I'm just getting some information. I'm not sending information. Now, one thing I want to point out is though we are creating a new company on the back end, think about it, my user request, they are just going to click a button. They're not sending and they're not naming the city and they're not creating or sending any sort of information with the request. We're just trying to see something. So it's a get route. And what I'm going to do is a couple things. I can, well, actually, there's two options. So you see GitHub Copilot, and I'll show you how the platform shows you how to do it. So this is saying I want to go to API/users/new. Now, this is something that we can create. You actually don't really need API. Well, let's just say this, or we could say API, it doesn't matter. This is our sort of route. So we're going to say API/user/new. So anytime that happens, we're going to take in this request and we're going to respond with a JSON object. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call this new user object. And when this is ran, it's going to go up to my object here, up to my function. It's going to run this, which is going to get me a whole bunch of random information. And then we're going to return that information that we are getting. Now, the platform says that you should do something like const new user equals new user object. And then instead of calling it in here, you would just pass it. You would pass in new user like this. Both work fine. The opposite, or the first one, was probably more efficient because now we're not creating a variable that's just living here and then coming there. I think it'd be minute. Either one works. I'm going to keep this one as is. And then whenever we do the company, we're going to do, we'll do it the other way and we'll see that both work just fine. Cool. So I've created a route that returns a new user. My route is, it's going to be localhost 8000 because that's what my server runs on, /API/users/new. When that happens, we're going to come here. It's going to return a request. Once we run in here, I am going to get, I'm going to create a variable called new user. It's going to be equal. It's going to be an object. This new user object, we're going to use Faker to generate some fake information. And we're just going to return that user so we can actually see it. Now, just because it's simple, and then we'll test and show Postman on this. Let's go ahead and do companies. It's going to be the exact same thing. But let's do the other way, where instead of doing it this way, we had talked about, I want to try both. So that way we can see that both are true. Is I am just going to say new company object, and we're going to call it in here just to show, hey, both can happen. Both work just fine. I'm actually delete this. They're the same thing. These are saying the same thing, except this is for user and this is for company. Perfect. Okay. We've done quite a bit. We got 11 minutes left. Anybody have any questions on this? Anybody have any questions? I'm going to run my server, seeing that it's working. Cool. So let's actually go to it. We're going to make a GET request to localhost 8000/API/users/new. And if I make this, we see that we get a random person. It generates an ID for us. Generates an ID, a first name, a last name, a phone number, some sort of random email, and a password. You would never want to just generate a password like this and actually be able to see it, but we're not there yet. If I run it again, I should get a brand new piece of information. Yep. Florida Considine with a new ID, a new phone number, all that stuff. If I were to change this with companies, again, just to show that that other version works too, I now get Buck Ridge and Sons company with an ID, an address object here that has, they are in Modesto, Minnesota. Don't know if that works in Myanmar. So we love that. Very out of there. Ah, yes. Minnesota, Myanmar, where it snows a whole bunch, but it also is like not that case. Very funny. Okay, so we know that this works. Are there any questions in sorry, cat thing. Are there any questions on what we did and how we accomplished that? Before we finish this last piece and then Faker API is done. Does that make sense? Any questions?
So you didn't actually need to return anything out of that new company object. Like you can just call the function.
Yeah,
Clearly.
so I don't have to return because I put a parentheses around this. And by putting a parentheses, it implies a return. If I just had it as this, then if I just have curly brackets, then I have to do a return.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, but having a parentheses around it just implies that it's going to return. It does it for you. Somebody asked, I should have asked this a while ago, but we don't need a number for the street. I mean, I guess we could. I was just going off what the assignment was asking. Does it say a street number? It doesn't ask that. So we could if you wanted. If you wanted to have like a street number, we could. Let's see.
But it would then have to go in a separate line because it's a separate part of the object.
I think I wonder if we could. You could, or A, I want to see what the API has, and then B, I'm wondering if you could concatenate the two. Like you could just say that this is, this plus this.
What's street address instead of just street on the far right?
Oh yeah, you could have done street address. Yep, so we could have done street address and that would have given the full thing. So you can do either one. The whole point is just, can you create an object and then show that? But yeah, you could have done street address. Cool. Now, the last thing we need to do is we need to create a route that returns a new company. Oops, we've already done that. I create a route that returns a new user and a new company. So we know what we're doing, right? We know how to do this. So we're going to say app.get, and it already knows. We're going to say /user/company. And that is going to give us, that's just the route we choose. Again, we choose this route. So it can be kind of whatever we need it to be. Now you could do this. This is the shorthand version, and I'll show you the longhand version here in a second. What this is doing is this is responding with an object with a key of user, that is a new user object, and a key of company with a new company object. You could have also said something like const new user equals this, const new company, and then you could have said, const combined object equals, you don't even need to, yeah, you do something like this and then return that. Or you could just say, I don't want to do that because if I do this, it'll be different. I could say user, new user object. You'd say something like this, and then same thing with company, new company object, and then just returned combined object here, or you can see that it just did it all in one line. Just does the exact same thing. This is returning an object with a key of user whose value is the user object, and a key of company whose value is the company object. So this is returning both. So it just took something that is, 4 lines and put it into one. So now if I run this and I say API / I think it's user / company. Yep. /user / company. We run this. Now we get back a user whose value is this and a company whose value is this. Come back to our assignment. We can say, okay, we've created those two functions. We've created our app route of new companies, user company. We've run our server and we've used Postman to test them out. We have now officially completed Faker API. Let's go back to the code so that way you guys can see it. Are there any questions? We got 5 minutes. We were able to do it in 40 minutes. I'll just keep it console logged out. Any questions on this?
Can I just make a comment? Okay.
Yeah.
When you're just moving forward, like, when we start to, include the back end, this may be obvious for others, but just in case sometimes we forget because we're, coding. You always want to create before trying to read, update, delete. Sometimes we forget we may go out of order and like, oh, we just do a read, but if you didn't create anything, you can't read or update or delete. So always start off with create and then, do your read and update, delete, preferably in that order, but definitely make sure you create first, before you start trying to do any type of, CRUD functionality. So yeah, just for, I know it's obvious for some folks, but other folks are like, oh shoot, that's right, I didn't create anything. And the same thing with like Python or Java and, same concept there. So I just want to kind of iterate that point there. Right, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, because if I would try to read this right now, we're creating something by calling this object. Today, we're actually going to break Gray's rule and we're going to read without creating anything. But that's just to get us set up. If we can at the end, we'll try to create something. But yeah, I mean that's a great point. If I were to try to run this and I get a response of like today we're gonna get a response of a list, it's gonna be empty, or an array that's gonna be empty. You're gonna be like, does this not work? And it's like, no, it's just the fact is that you don't have anything in there, so it gets really challenging to test. You're like, oh, this isn't working. You just don't have anything there. So that's a great point, Gray, is always try to populate first and then query and see if you're trying to do a filter, if you're trying to get, by one ID. If you don't have any IDs in there, it's never going to work. But your code could be perfect, but you drive yourself crazy saying, oh man, I don't know what's going on. So anybody else have any questions? Again, I'm sorry I can't push this code to GitHub because it's technically a core assignment. I think I probably could get in trouble for doing this, but you know what? It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission sometimes, Any other questions? Cool. I'm gonna stop the recording, but I'll be here in case you guys need